It's a great pleasure to be back in Yerevan, and what better spot to talk about honesty and diplomacy. Now, some of you may think that this title is actually a joke. How many of you think that there is honesty in diplomacy? Can I have a show of hands? Does anybody think there is? Not so many. By the way, I want to tell you that I'm in native dress. This is native diplomatic dress, just so you know. The idea that diplomacy is a dirty business, that it's dishonest, goes very far back. There was an eminent Elizabethan, Sir Henry Wotton, who famously wrote that an ambassador is an honest man sent to lie abroad for his country. Now, what people don't realize is there's a little bit of a wordplay there, because lie abroad also meant to sleep around, or as people might say today, hook up. And it's true that in the courtly diplomacy of the Elizabethan and then the 18th century, there was a lot of court intrigue, and seducing the king's mistress might have been a very good way to obtain information. And information is what diplomats generally deal in. They're in the information business. Now, diplomacy is also sometimes called the second oldest profession. This is the native dress. But we diplomats have always known, we professional diplomats, now I'm not talking about the ones who made a lot of money selling used cars and donated money to one party or the other and got the job that way. I'm talking about the professional diplomats who study to become diplomats, who are taught by their elders, who are apprenticed, and so on. The real professionals. We have always known that we are honest with each other. It's a demand of the profession. The 17th century French diplomatist Callière wrote a treatise on diplomacy in which he said that no true diplomat ever tells a falsehood. And I would add to that a diplomat has to be not only truthful, but accurate and up to date. Any diplomat who fails to read the newspapers in the morning, who fails to be up to date with the latest world events and situations and so on, is not going to be consulted either by other diplomats or by his own government. When you are representing your country, you do not dare to destroy your own personal credibility or that of the government that you represent. Credibility is the currency of diplomacy. Now, there's a difference between honesty among professionals and the question of confidentiality. Now, diplomats, as a rule, practice their trade of communicating between governments, reporting back to their own governments, informing other governments. As a rule, they practice this profession with the protection of confidentiality. That's what the secret codes and the methods of communication are all about. And recently, with WikiLeaks, we've had an unprecedented collapse of this veil of confidentiality. And what does it show us? Mostly what it has shown us is that the things that, and I can only really speak about the Americans, because WikiLeaks affected the confidentiality of American diplomatic reporting. By and large, these reports didn't surprise anybody because they described situations that journalists and scholars and others were also describing. Now, occasionally there's a little bit of extra flavor in some of these reports. There might even be some some humor. One of the reports that got a lot of attention was describing a wedding in Dagestan that was really quite unusual for all sorts of reasons. But the diplomats were reporting accurately and honestly what they saw, or what they heard, or what they were told. Now, where the difficulty has come in for certain parties, and I'll give an example, a real-life example, that is the President Saleh of Yemen, who in WikiLeaks has now been revealed to have admitted to the US Embassy that he lied to his own parliament about who was running the drones around Yemen. Now, Yemen today is in the throes of a kind of revolution. In North Africa, one of the leaked cables confirmed for the Tunisians what they all knew about the ruling family there, that there was rampant corruption, nepotism, and so on, and the description of this added fuel to the fire there. The same kind of thing happened in Libya. But it's not because the diplomats were dishonest, it's because they told the truth, and the truth was revealed through the lapse of confidentiality occasioned by WikiLeaks. Now, in a couple of cases that I know about, 2 American ambassadors have had to leave their posts. Carlos Pascual from Mexico City and Heather Hodges from Colombia. Not because what they reported was untrue, but precisely because it was all too true and the governments there didn't like it at all. And in fact, went to the White House in the case of Carlos to, excuse me, I'm a little nervous. I don't know why, but I am. I shouldn't be with this good group of Armenians. So 2 of our ambassadors had to be recalled, replaced by other people. One American scholar, John Mearsheimer, who's a professor of international relations at Chicago, University of Chicago, you may know of him, before WikiLeaks really happened, started to write a book about lying in international relations. And he thought that there would be lots of examples of this. And what he discovered was there were very few, in fact. States generally, and their representatives, meaning the diplomats, don't lie to each other. Why? The professional considerations that I've already mentioned, but also because over a period of time, they're going to be found out. I mean, it's not easy to keep up a lie, and the cost of a country lying can be great. Now, there are examples of it. It has happened in certain situations. Diplomats of one state or statesmen of one state have misled others, usually for reasons that they thought overcame the downside or the opprobrium attached to lying. But what Mearsheimer has found, and his book ended up being called Why Leaders Lie. His discovery was this, that it's not the practitioners of diplomacy who are misleading anyone. Dictators we know lie, but so do democratic leaders. And he gives 5 examples. I'll mention them quickly. They're all American. The first one, Franklin Roosevelt in 1941 lied to the American public about the circumstances under which an American naval vessel was sunk in the Atlantic. He did it to build consensus for going to war against Germany. In the end, of course, the Japanese took care of that at Pearl Harbor, and we got into World War II. The second example he gave was of Dwight Eisenhower who lied about the U-2 spy plane, Gary Powers, who was shot down over the Soviet Union. The third example was Lyndon Johnson in describing to the American public the events in the Gulf of Tonkin in the build-up to Vietnam. Another example, well, now there's an example of what we're not discussing today, and that's Bill Clinton talking about Monica Lewinsky. Let's leave that to the side. In terms of international relations, that's a fairly inconsequential kind of lie, of the sort that, you know, gentlemen in the audience, if your wife asks you, does this dress make me look fat? You're going to lie. That's different. And then another final example, which has actually been mentioned here today, is that of the Bush-Cheney administration, which Mearsheimer shows told basically 4 lies as we were going into the Iraq War. Now, I'm not going to get into that. You can find the book if you're interested. It's called Why Leaders Lie, Oxford University Press, this year. So where does this take us? What it tells us is that leaders do mislead their publics. Now, usually, when it happens, they're doing it because they think they know better something about the international environment. They think their publics will not follow them into a certain policy unless they very much exaggerate the threat. This is a kind of a policy lie. It's a lie designed to make a certain policy choice more desirable or more acceptable to the public. But then there's another kind of a lie, a bigger kind of a lie. And that is, you know, Balzac, I think it was, said that every great family fortune is based on a great crime. And many nation states are also based on either a crime or, call it a victory. In some cases, it's a defeat. The Armenians being defeated by the Persians in 458, was it? Might be considered one of those founding moments. When the Serbs were defeated at Kosovo Polje in 1387, defeated, that is considered by Serbs to have been the founding of their nation. It's one reason they're so attached politically and emotionally and culturally to Kosovo. But these myths are what states lie about in the deepest and most harmful way. We in the United States, of course, have our founding myth. We have a mixture of myths, how the good Englishmen, they don't usually talk about the other nationalities, but the Englishmen came to Virginia and met the Indians. Of course, some of the Indians came and attacked us, but we basically took their land. So the myth of, or the story that we tell about winning the West, we don't talk about a 400-year rolling genocide. And not all of it was genocidal under the definition that we have. There were attacks in both directions. But we do know, we have written instructions of one British officer to send smallpox-infected blankets to a village to kill the inhabitants of that village. That was a genocidal act. We don't talk about that very much. And there are other countries, as no one in this room needs to be reminded, who were founded on a great crime or great victory, whichever way you put it. I 6 years ago, decided to call it a crime, you know what I'm talking about. But maybe the lesson today is to understand what a huge lie this is and how difficult it is for the Turks to get beyond that enormous lie, which with each year that passes becomes more difficult because the wrong story has been taught to yet another crop of students, of school children. So this is a very difficult issue, as we all know. But I do not believe that problems of this sort can be solved by silence. We have to look at the truth. It's in our nature as human beings. Now, I remember in one meeting in 2005 in Washington, a Turkish ambassador who was visiting said, "You know, each nation creates the history that it needs as a nation. And that's why the Armenians say there was a genocide. There was no genocide. If we had wanted to kill them all, we would have used bullets." He was talking about Armenian myth-making. This is very, very difficult stuff. What I was trying to do 6 years ago, and I'm so grateful to Civilitas to have invited me back 5 years after I left, particularly at this time, and to such a wonderful event. But what I was trying to do then was there was a taboo. We didn't have an instruction from the Secretary of State saying, "You may not talk about this subject." We just had deeply misleading talking points that we were supposed to deploy. And they started out by saying, no U.S. official has ever denied the facts of what happened in 1915. Never mind that none of us in the early days really knew. I mean, the scholarship on the Armenian genocide has increased so amazingly in the last 20 years. But 25 years ago, hardly anybody knew about it. And nor did many of us professional diplomats know about the Genocide Convention, which was signed by the United States in 1948, but only ratified in 1968. And why did it take so long? Because there were certain senators, Southern senators, who feared that the Genocide Convention could be used against the United States in the matter of lynching. So, where does this bring us? I think we just have to challenge again ourselves to understand the role of myth in our lives, in our political lives, to understand that these are difficult problems, but they can't be solved by silence. They can only be solved when they're discussed in an open way. And one final thought. The subject of today's conference, supposedly, is becoming young. And I think, when we're young, we're idealistic. The idealism gets beaten out of us over the years, particularly if you're in a large institution. But at some point, you may come to the realization that it's not enough just to do your job, even to do your job well, and that you want to stand for something, you want to do something that might make a little bit of a change. And you go back to that youthful idealism, a different set of morality than the professional strictures that are inculcated in us. And I hope every one of you will consider yourselves what you can do. And again, thank you for your attention. and God bless you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.